This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome every one of you that is here at Olive Tree, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And those of you that are coming in through our YouTube and Facebook channels, we want to thank every one of you for joining us today. We are going to continue in the life of Abraham. And so we want to welcome you to our Torah study. And today we have our fourth Parsha of the year, and it's Parsha Vayera. Vayera. And this Vayera means, and he appeared. And talking from Genesis 18:1 to 22:24. And he appeared. And when it says, and he appeared, the question that we need to ask, first of all, is who appeared? Who is the he that appeared to our father Abraham? Now, today's Parsha, also, like all the Parashot, each one has some sub-parshas in them. There's some and today's we have 10 sub-parshas in the Parsha, and he appeared. The apparition at Mamre, which is Hebron, where he appeared. We're going to talk about Abraham's intercession for Sodom and Gomorrah, but the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and over here also we have the origin of the Moabites and the Ammonites as descendants of Lot. Abraham goes to Gerad. Isaac is born. Hagar and Ishmael are dismissed, and then Abraham and Abimelech are at Beersheba, and again the sacrifice of Isaac and the descendants of Nahor. So there's a lot to this parasha. But we also have, we're going to talk about today, Abraham and Yeshua. What is the connection between Abraham and Yeshua? And we're also going to talk, continuing from last week's study, who are the children of Abraham? And of course, this leads us to what is the olive tree of Israel. And so let's go to our study here. And first of all, we have a map. And we see here that here is Hebron, and here is Mamre. Here's where Abraham is living, and it's just right by Hebron. Of course, here is what will become Jerusalem. At this time, it is known as Jebus or Salem, which would become Jerusalem, the foundation of peace, and the Jebusites live there. Of course, we have Jericho, and we have Beersheba here, and Gerar. Here's another place, Gaza. The Philistines were in this area, Canaanites. And so here's Sodom. Here's the Dead Sea. And so this is a map of where Abraham and his descendants pretty much spent most of their life. And so it is central Jerusalem. The central highlands are here. Here's the coastline. And of course, the Jordan Valley. But these are mountainous. And then from Beersheba south, it becomes very wilderness, very the Arava the deserts. And so just to get your perspective of where we're talking about. Now, let's start with Genesis 18:1. And Yahweh appeared, and he appeared. Who is the he? And Yahweh appeared to him at the plains of Mamre while he was sitting by the entrance of the tent during the hottest part of the day. Now, we know what he was doing. In fact, there's Abraham right there. He's sitting by the tent on the hottest part of the day. He was taking a siesta. That's exactly what they do in areas that are very hot. You work from sometimes even before sunrise, and you work in the morning. But when the sun is at its hottest, you take a 2-3 hour siesta. After you eat, you take a 2-3 hour siesta, and you sleep. And then as the sun is going down, you continue working again. And so he was a desert dweller. And so he lived in a tent. And in the hottest part of the day, he was sitting by the entrance of that tent. And what occurred is he has 3 visitors. Now, let's go here to our chapter. And it says that he was there by the oak of Mamre, and he looked up, and it says he saw 3 men near him. Now, here you're kind of, you know how it is. It's hot, and you ate, and you're sleepy, and you kind of are dozing off, and you kind of wake up and doze off, and all of a sudden he opens his eyes. And as he opens his eyes, there's 3 men. That might startle us. That might, what's happening? ¿Qué pasa? And so he, in a sense, wakes up. And as soon as he saw them, he ran from the entrance to meet them and bowed to the ground. And then he says, Adoni, my lords, in the plural, Adoni. And he is talking to 3 men. And remember, in those days, to call someone Adoni, my lords, Adonai, the word Adonai means master. We translate it in King James as Lord. Remember, King James English, the word Lord isn't just something that is for Elohim, for Yahweh. The word Lord in English is used for a master. In England, they have the House of Lords, and the kings were said, your lordship. So the word Lord is not a religious term only for Yahweh. It is a term that is also used for men. And here, again, not knowing who these men were, Abraham calls them my masters, my lords in King James English. And these 3 men we're going to see are 2 angels and Yahweh. And it says that Yahweh appeared to him. And it goes on to say here, I beg you, if I find favor, don't pass your servant by. Abraham is showing what we would call today Middle Eastern hospitality. In the Middle East, hospitality, opening your home, having strangers come in, is a very big value. That's part of their value system. Hospitality is a Middle Eastern value that the West has lost, that we don't have in the West. And so it's an honor, it's a privilege to have people come. It's an honor and a privilege to have people visit and for you to serve them, for you to open up your house and whatever you have, even if it's little, to give them something that would extend to them a courtesy, extend to them a blessing. And here he is. And it seems that this master had two servants, and these two other men who would be angels would be like the servants. Many times a Middle Eastern master, a Middle Eastern chieftain would travel, and he'd have his bodyguards. And in a sense, it's almost like if here's a Middle Eastern chieftain with his two bodyguards, and they're there, and Abraham wants to serve them. And he says, he calls Sarah, and he says, a little water should be brought. Wash your feet. And remember, they're sandals, and they're tired. Now, remember, these are men. We know who they are because we've read the rest of the story. But at this time, Abraham doesn't know who they are. They're tired men. They've been walking in the sand, and they need water. And he says, let me fetch a little bread, little lechem, to refresh yourself before you go further. This is why you have come. You have come just so I could show you this courtesy. And so he calls Sarah over, and he says, need some bread, and make some loaves. The word loaf there is the word ugla, uga. Have you ever, that's kind of like a horn in the car, uga. And what uga is, I don't know if you ever had, they get the dough, and then they get a rolling pin, a bolillo, and they make these round breads. What do they call them? Tortillas. Uga, tortillas. And so they were round little tortillas. He says, make some. And so Sarah, like I saw growing up, whenever people come, what was the first thing our grandmas, our tias would do? Right away, when people come, they start making tortillas. Right away, it was almost like a second nature when we had visitors. And as I'm reading this, I'm kind of remembering my grandma's house and how they would also do that. And he goes to the servant and says, get a calf, a tender calf, and prepare it. And it says there that then taking some milk and some cream and the calf he had prepared, he laid them before them, and they ate while he remained standing near under the tree. And so, again, this is part of Middle Eastern hospitality. You prepare the food, and you put it there, and you stand. The word stand in Hebrew is the word eved. And this means a servant, a stander, a waiter. When we think of a waiter, anybody been waiters or waitresses? Well, what you do when you're a waiter or waitress, you really should stand and look. In fact, a good waiter and a good waitress always is looking with the corner of their eye as to what's going on. Have you ever been to someplace and the waiters or the waitresses are out there just doing what, and you need something, and they're not looking at you. In a sense, what a waiter does, what a servant does, is he waits, he stands so that they could ask him for more or this, a napkin. And so that's what Abraham does. Abraham just stands there as they eat. And it's interesting that what he does is he serves them the calf, the little pieces of the calf, the maybe some barbacoa, some carnitas, some carne asada, and then he also gives them cream. He gives them milk. Now, this is one of those places where we see that Abraham is mixing meat and dairy together. Today, this is, in a sense, considered not kosher in the religion of Judaism, but it's kosher in biblical. So for those of you that might have a problem with now if it's digestive, we could understand. But mixing or separating meat and dairy is not a biblical. That's a superstition. That's a pagan superstition. So please don't get involved in all those superstitions that a lot of people have. And then it says, where is your wife Sarah? So one of the men asked him, where is your wife Sarah? This person, this chieftain, if you will, asks and has a meeting with Abraham. Where is your wife Sarah? And he goes on to say, I shall visit you again next year without fail, and your wife will have a son. Now remember, he's 99 years old. And far, not only him, but Sarah, far beyond the time of having children. But Abraham is a man of faith. Abraham is a man that Adonai has specifically chosen. There's something about Abraham that is of importance. And Adonai comes to him. He's already made covenants. He's already made promises. From Lech Lecha, chapter 12, 1-3. Adonai made promises. You're going to have a son. You're going to be blessed, a great nation, a land, seed, and a blessing we saw last week. And Adonai continues this. Adonai made a covenant. He cut the animals in half, and Adonai made a covenant with Abraham. And you're going to have a son. You're going to have a son. And he went childless for many years. He even got to the point one time saying, is my servant going to be my heir? No. You're going to have a son. And now Adonai says, next year you will have a son. Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well on in years, and Sarah ceased to have her time. So Sarah laughed. In a sense, Sarah giggled. What she did, she giggled. She didn't laugh a laugh of unbelief, but she had a giggle there, thinking to herself, now I'm past the age of childbirth. Am I to have joy now? And Yahweh, it says there, Yahweh asked Abraham, why did Sarah giggle? Why did she laugh? Am I really going to have a child now that I am old? Is anything too wonderful for Yahweh? At the same time next year, I shall visit you again, and Sarah will have a son. I did not giggle. Sarah says, I didn't laugh. Because she was afraid. But he, the man, the leader, says, oh yes, you did laugh. Yes, you did laugh. Now we're going to find out that Isaac means laughter. But was that the laughter of here? Of where she is wondering? No, it's the laughter that Sarah has when Isaac is born. She laughs. And that's a different kind of laughter. That's a laughter of joy. And he's named after not the giggle, but he's named after the laughter of joy. And we see here that Yahweh not only ate and drank with him, he spoke with Abraham, but there is a meeting between Abraham. There's something here in Yahweh. It's interesting that Yahweh appears as a man. Now, let's go on to verse 16 there. From there, the men set out and arrived in sight of Sodom. And we'll look at that in a little while. With Abraham accompanying them to show them the way. Now, Yahweh, now this is why when we read Scripture, we already use the word Lord in King James or Master for Adon. In fact, in Spanish, we have the word Don Pedro, Don Juan, Doña Ana, Doña, as Don and Doña, as the masters of the house. These were titles given to landowners. Anybody who was a landlord would be called a Don. Now, in today's world, sometimes we use that as a honorific title for an elderly man or an elderly woman, but in ancient times, it was the sign of a landlord. And again, the term landlord in English has that same thing as Don. And so over here, it's important for us to know that this is not the word Lord as in Adonai, but this is the word Lord in your King James or English Bibles. If your verse says Lord here, we're not talking about Adonai. We're talking here now about Yahweh. And here's the confusion that I wish translators would not use the same word Lord for Adonai and for Yahweh. When you choose a Bible that separates. And again, there's very few Bibles that do that, but I really have a problem with most modern English Bibles because they don't translate these terms correctly. But now it says, now Yahweh had wondered, shall I conceal from Abraham what I'm going to do? And so what Yahweh actually does is he comes here and he meets with Abraham because he's going to show Abraham what's going to be happening with Sodom and Gomorrah. So he says, shall I hide this from him? Shall I conceal it, or shall I say it to him? But, of course, we know that he does bless him. In verse 18 says, seeing that he will become a great nation, a goy gadol, a great nation, with all the nations of the earth blessing themselves by him. Now remember, Adonai has already used this same term with Abraham before. All the nations of the earth, all the mishpocha shall blessed, all the goyim shall be blessed by him. And he'll use the same phrase with Isaac, and he'll use the same phrase with Yaakov. All the nations will be blessed by Abraham. And last week's study, we said that was the gospel. And we're going to go back to that in Galatians 3 today as we close, because it's a very important phrase that we as believers need to really follow. Now, in verse 19, this is one of those verses, verse 19, that I wish everyone would underline in their Bible, would mark in yellow. And it's a very important phrase. And it says, for I have singled him out to command his sons and his household after him to keep the way of Yahweh by doing what is upright and just, so that Yahweh can carry out for Abraham what he has promised him. This is what we call Haderech Yahweh, the way of Yahweh. Now, the word derech in Hebrew is the word for a road. I have a picture there of a road, a trail, a journey. The way of Yahweh is el camino de Yahweh. In Spanish, el camino. And every one of us walks in this road or in this road. We all walk in the Haderech Yahweh, or we walk in the Haderech Hasatan, in the way of Hasatan. And there's only two ways. Now, there's a way that seems right to a man. There's a derech that seems right. There's a road that, everything is nice on this road. There's a way, there's a haderech that seems right to a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. There are two roads. And there is a wide road. And many there are that go on that derech. The derech hasatan, the derech hamot, the road of death is wide, and many are the travelers there. But Haderech Yahweh, the way of Yahweh, is a narrow road, and few are there that go through that road. Now, I want to walk the narrow road. I don't want to walk the wide road that everybody's going through. I want to walk that narrow road. And that narrow road is the way of Yahweh. Now, it's interesting that Adonai says, I've singled him out. See, Adonai is always watching. And when Abraham was named Avram, and he lived in Ur, that was to become Ur of the Chaldeans in southern Babylon area, south of Babylon. And then Abraham was a Gentile there. He was just in a pagan family. Abraham grew up in a pagan family, an idol-worshiping family. But there was something there about Abraham that Adonai saw. There was something about this young man, Abraham, that Adonai loved. And that's why he says to him, Lech lecha, arise for yourself, stand up and go to a place that I will show you, and I will bless you, and I'll make you a great nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed by you. And Abraham was singled out to command his sons and his household, to lead his sons and his household after him, to keep the way of Yahweh. The word keep there, shamar, is to guard. Abraham was singled out to have children, to have sons, to have a family. And through his sons, that the sons would keep the way of Yahweh. To keep his way. And what is the way of Yahweh? What is Haderech Yahweh? Haderech Yahweh is Torah. What Adonai has given us from Adam to Abraham, from Abraham through Moses, through Yeshua, through the apostles, that's the way of Yahweh. Your Bible from Genesis to Revelation is Haderech Yahweh. This is the way of Yahweh. This is the only way of Yahweh. There's nothing outside of these 66 books that is the way of Yahweh. The way of Yahweh is in these 66 books. And Adonai, by the way, when it says command his sons, we're not just talking about the Hebrews. We're not talking about Isaac, Yaakov, the 12, and their descendants. We're not talking about the 12 tribes only. We're talking about every son of Abraham, because the children of Abraham are not just Israel. When we talk about the children of Israel, we're talking about natural branches of the olive tree of Israel, some of who are believers, some of who are unbelievers. In fact, the majority of the Israelites today, the majority of Jewish people are not sons of Abraham today. Yeah, they're sons of Abraham in the flesh, but they're not sons of Abraham in the spirit. And those of you that would consider yourself, well, I'm a Gentile. Well, wait a second. If you've been baptized in Yeshua, we saw last week, you've been baptized in Yeshua, then you are the sons of Abraham. You are the seed of Abraham. And you are more sons of Abraham than the natural sons of Abraham. And Adonai considers you just as much sons of Abraham as the natural sons of Abraham that have accepted Yeshua and are following the new covenant and are following Chaderech Yahweh. Chaderech Yahweh, the way of Yahweh, is Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic, all three at the same time. And so let's start getting into our minds the idea that every one of us is a son, a daughter of Abraham, just by believing. And again, we're going to look at that in Galatians later on. But that is an important idea that must be followed. Then the men, too, turned away from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham was still standing before Yahweh. Now, look at this. While he was standing before Yahweh. And here is Abraham. And here is Yahweh. And again, this is the Jordan River. And Yahweh is talking to Abraham about what he's going to do to Sodom. He's going to talk about the sin of Sodom, which was homosexuality. You know, today, because we live in a world of the LGBTZ community, all that, it is not politically correct to talk against that. But to Adonai, the LGBTZ community is an abomination to Yahweh. It is the same abomination as any other sin that we commit that is immoral sins. And so Adonai says he is going to destroy Sodom. And again, Abraham starts a negotiation. The people of Sodom, the men of Sodom, were an abomination to Adonai. But Abraham, and here we see the heart of Abraham again. But what if there's 50 just people? What if there's 50 people in Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities, of the 5 cities of the plain? What if there was 50 righteous people? Are you going to destroy the 50 with the unrighteous? And of course, Adonai says no. Yeah, but what if there's 45? What if there's 30? What if there's 20? What if there's 10? Adonai says, no, I won't destroy the 10. That means that when the judgment came, there wasn't 10 righteous men. In fact, there was only one righteous man. One man that believed, that followed Adonai, and that was Lot. A man just like us, a man who, yes, was a follower, had faith, was a believer, was a righteous man, but Adonai had to do the same thing again. He had to deliver this man out and his family so that he could bring judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, it says there that, while Abraham was still standing with Yahweh. Well, wait a second. I thought nobody could see Yahweh. Remember, we're told many times in Scripture, you can't see Yahweh. Yahweh is not a man. Yet here, Yahweh appears to Abraham as a man. By the way, when these angels and Yahweh appeared, and this clears up one of the questions that someone had about the sons of Elohim and the daughters of man. How could they do that? Because I thought, and we went through that a couple of weeks ago in Parsha Noach about them being humans. But when an angel, or here Yahweh, takes on humanity, all the aspects of humanity are there. And we could see this because Yahweh, now think of this, Yahweh and the two angels sat there and they ate. They ate and they drank of the milk and they had the cream and they had the tortillas. They had the bread. They had the meat. And they ate. They were human. They took on human characteristics. And when you take on human characteristics, then you are able to eat and drink and do other human things. All the attributes of humanity are taken on by these two angels and Yahweh. Well, who is Yahweh? Now, the next verse is going to clear this up really importantly. Watch what it says in Genesis 19:24 when Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed. Then Yahweh rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Yahweh. Wait a second. How could Yahweh rain down fire and brimstone from Yahweh? This brings us into a possibility. This brings us into, for us to open our eyes, that when we talk about, and a word that Adonai has given me that I've been teaching lately, is the word, the Elohut. The Elohut is the Elohimness or Elohimhood of Yahweh. And we know that Yeshua said, I and the Father are echad, we are one. When the way we believe in a unity, in plurality. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, echad. Yahweh are Elohim. The word Yahweh is singular. The word Yahweh is singular. But Elohim is plural. Yahweh are Elohim in plurality. Yahweh is echad. Echad is a Hebrew word that is a composite unity. Notice what he didn't say. It doesn't say, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Yahid. It doesn't say that he's Yahid, that he's an absolute one. It says that he is a composite one. He is Echad. Yahweh is Echad. Yahweh is not Yahid. And we see here that Yeshua is Yahweh. Every one of us must understand that Yeshua is Yahweh. In fact, it tells us we're going to see this again, that whoever calls upon the name of Yahweh will be saved. Whoever calls upon the name of Yahweh will be saved. And then we are told that you're not saved unless you believe that Yeshua is Yahweh. If you believe in your heart that Yeshua is Yahweh, you will be saved. There is no salvation outside of saying that if anyone says that Yeshua is not Yahweh, he can't be saved. Yeshua is Yahweh. And so we see here Yahweh the Father in his oneness and his sameness and unity with the Word of Yahweh, which is Yeshua. In the beginning was the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was face to face, proston theon in the Greek there, means face to face with Elohim, but then he was Elohim. I can't be face to face with someone that I am. I'm either face to face with someone else or I'm alone. But in the Elohutness of Adonai, in the Elohutness of Yahweh, he is one and plural at the same time. And that plurality is triadic. That plurality is triadic because we see in what we call the triadic verses where we see the Elohut as Father, as Son, and as Holy Spirit. But over here we see the Father and the one who would become the Son, Yeshua, and the Word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten Son of Elohim. Here is where Yeshua is the Yahid, only begotten, one and only, absolute one and only. Adonai does not have other sons. He only has only one begotten Son, and that's Yeshua. And of course, we are all sons through what Yeshua did, through the posterity, as we're going to see with Galatians. We see here that he comes and he destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. And go with me to chapter 21. Yahweh dealt kindly with Sarah, as he had said, and did what he had promised her. So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the time that Elohim had promised. And Abraham named the son born to him Laughter, Isaac. The son to whom Sarah had given birth, Abraham circumcised his son when he was 8 days old, and Elohim commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. Then Sarah said, Elohim has given me cause for laughter. All those who hear of it will laugh with me. Who would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a child in his old age. And so Isaac is born. Now, we actually go now to 30 years later. Now, when you think of Isaac, he's born, and then we have the sacrifice of Isaac. And most people think that Isaac was a little baby or a little boy, but Isaac was probably around 30 years old when the sacrifice occurs. And for that, let's go to chapter 22. Chapter 22. It happened sometime later that Elohim put Abraham to a trial, not to a test. Sometimes it could be a test, sometimes it could be a trial. But a trial, when we think of a test, it's almost like Adonai's testing him, see he's going to falter. No, we're talking about a trial. We're talking about a dilemma. Adonai puts Abraham to a dilemma. And this dilemma is going to prove from Adonai's point of view, is going to prove the faith of Abraham. Remember, he's not testing him to see if he would fail or if he would pass the test. No, he's giving him a dilemma, a trial, to show, to lift up Abraham as a man of faith, and in a sense to be a trophy of Abraham's faith, and to make sure that the faith of Abraham is passed out, as we're going to see later on. And the trial, the dilemma was, take your son, Elohim said, your only son, your Yachid son. Because remember, this is his only son, his Yachid, one son. Now, he also has a son through Hagar, who he dismissed. And yes, he has another son. But that son in the flesh, even to this day, even though his son in the flesh is not considered Abrahamic. In fact, that son, Ishmael, is an Egyptian. He's not an Arab. He's not he's an Egyptian, because remember, the mother was Egyptian. And he got him, Hagar got him a wife from Egypt. So the Ishmaelites are Egyptians. The Ishmaelites are Egyptians. And he says, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. The one whom, this is his pride and joy. This is the son of the promise. Isaac is not a son of the flesh. Ishmael was a son of the flesh. It was a son of a fleshly idea, a human idea. Adonai said to Abraham and Sarah, you're going to have a son. And as Abraham, this is when Abraham was 75 years old. And he waits 25 years before he has the son of the promise. But when he was 75 and Adonai had promised him a son. Well, what happens if Adonai promises you a son and it doesn't come in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? Then you start thinking, and this is where Sarah started thinking, and Abraham capitulated to her. Like Adam listened to the voice of his wife, Abraham listened to the voice of his wife, and what they concocted was a plan. Well, maybe Adonai did not mean literal. Maybe Adonai did not mean a real son through me. Maybe he meant a surrogate son. So here is my maid, Hagar, my Egyptian maid. Go to her and have a son. And what they would do in those days in a surrogate relationship like that, when the son would be born, the two women would be next to each other, and the son of the surrogate would be put on the womb of the mother to be, in a sense, and in a sense passed out symbolically, and here's the son. And in a sense, that's what they did. But that wasn't Adonai. That was the flesh. That was human thinking. That was human reasoning. How many times do we say Adonai has promised us something in the scripture, and then we say, well, maybe it wasn't that. And so we start helping Elohim out? Have you ever helped Elohim out in the promises that he's given to you? And we help him out in this and we help him out. No, Adonai doesn't need our help. And so what happens is that here Isaac, the only son, the one he loves, and go to the land of Moriah. Go to the land of Moriah, the Moriah Ridge. And the Moriah Ridge is a very prominent ridge, which is now the center of Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is right on the Moriah Ridge. And the south end, what we call the city of David, is where Salem was, where Melchizedek lived. And this was the upper part of the Moriah Ridge. And it says there you shall offer him as a burnt offering on the mountain I will point out to you. You will offer him as a burnt offering. Now, what a burnt offering is, a holocaust. What a holocaust is where you sacrifice the animal. You sacrifice the animal, and the blood pours out. And then you get the carcass of the animal, and the whole carcass, the whole animal is put on the fire, and it is completely burnt. And the whole animal, the smell of the animal, the flesh, the fat of the animal, and all of it goes up as smoke. That's a holocaust. And what Adonai is telling Abraham, I want you to take your only begotten son, your only one. Now, I'm not talking about someone else. You're only the one you love. And I want you to sacrifice him. Let go. A sacrifice is a letting go, a complete separation. And I want you to sacrifice him, to slay him. And I want you to offer him as a burnt offering. Complete, whole, completely gone, so he becomes ashes. Now, this is a dilemma. This is a dilemma. And the reason it's a dilemma, the reason it's a trial, is because Adonai had already said to Abraham, not through Ishmael, the son of the flesh, but through Isaac, the son of the promise. He, and through his seed, all the nations will be blessed. Salvation will come through you, through Isaac, and through his descendants. And the seed, the Messiah, would come through Isaac. Well, that's a dilemma. Wait a second, Adonai. Isaac isn't married. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have children. The promise is going to be through Isaac, but I want you to sacrifice him. The promise is coming through here, but you need to get rid of him. Oh, wait a second. How could that be? The only way it could be is through Isaac. But if I burn him, if I make him a holocaust, there's no promise. But see, here's where Abraham, the man of faith, remember, Lech Lecha, leave your family. Adonai has already he's already exhibited faith in so many ways. 4 times already he has been the man of faith. And over here, Adonai lifts Abraham to show off his faith. It's Adonai who's showing, not Abraham who's showing off his faith, but Adonai showing off Abraham's faith. And so what we have here is Abraham now as the man of faith decides a way out. And there's only one way out. There's only one way out. There's only one thing that had never happened before. There's only one solution. What do you do if this son is going to bear sons to you, but now you're told to kill him? There's only one solution. What is it? What is that solution? That solution is a resurrection. That solution is resurrection. Abraham, in his mind, you could see his mind. How could I have a son through my son, but yet kill him? Only one way, through resurrection. Now what happens is they get up early in the morning. He gets his donkey. They take off. 2 servants, they chop wood. They put it there. On the third day, interesting, on the third day, Abraham looked up and he saw the place in a distance. Then Abraham said to his servant, "Stay here. The boy and I," now watch this, underline this verse. "The boy and I will go over there. We will worship and come back to you." Stay here, wait for us here. At the bottom, they probably stayed in Salim, at the bottom of the hill. "We will go, me and the boy will go up and worship, and we will come back to you." Now that's faith. Because remember, already he told him, "I want you to sacrifice him, but this is the son of the promise. But you must sacrifice him, he must die." But the solution was resurrection, and that's why with confidence, with faith, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. By faith, Abraham says, we're going to go up, we're going to go worship, and we're going to come back. We're going to come back. Again, faith. The solution was resurrection. He believed that he would raise him from the dead. And so now Abraham took the wood, the burnt offering, for the burnt offering, loaded it on Isaac. Isaac had to carry his wood on his back. Now they're going up to the hill. One of my favorite songs, and one of my most favorite songs is that song, "On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross." Remember that song? Here's the hill far away, the hill of Moriah. And here, 2,000 years before Yeshua, Isaac is climbing the opposite. Yeshua went this way to the hill of Calvary, and Isaac goes this way to the hill of Moriah. From the Tyroporean Valley in the middle, Calvary is on the other end, and Moriah is on this end. Isaac goes here. Yeshua, 2,000 years later, goes to the opposite hill, outside the gate, outside the camp, to die for the sins of the world. And here Isaac carries his own wood, carries his own timber on his back, and they bring the fire. And the fire is in the kettle, in the fire pot with the embers. And they bring the knife. And the two set out. Isaac spoke to his father and said, "Father, yes, my son, look, here is the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" where's the lamb? Obviously, he hadn't told Isaac that you, my son, are the sacrifice. Here's everything we need. Where's the lamb? And he says, Elohim himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. It's not up to us to provide the salvation. It's for Yahweh himself to provide it for us. The sacrifice does not come from us. The sacrifice comes from Yahweh. The provision does not come from us. We will not provide. Yes, we'll have the knife. We have all the other things needed, the wood. We have the fire. But we will not provide the lamb. That is a provision from Adonai. He will provide. Then the two went out together. When they arrived at the place Elohim had pointed out, this is the place. Remember, just go and I will point. He's used to Adonai telling him, leave and I'll point the way to you. From Ur to Haran, through Damascus and Dan, through Shechem and all these places, Adonai has been showing him step by step. Okay, now you could go here. See, sometimes Adonai doesn't tell us the whole way right away. We have to trust him on that journey day by day. And so they go, and Abraham arranges the wood. He binds his son. The binding is called the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Ha Akedah, the binding. What is the meaning of him binding him? Now, in an animal, you get an animal, and again, sheep and animals that you sacrifice, they don't know you're going to sacrifice them. And so you get the lamb and you stretch out the neck and you slay it, and it's dead. But we're talking here about a human, a man, a young man. And he has to be bound. Why does he have to be bound? Because he probably want to, when you see you're laid out and the knife is there, there's this agony, there's this fear. And so he binds him. He binds him. And what happens is he puts him, and Avraham stretched out his hand. He got the knife to kill him. But Melech Yahweh, the messenger of Yahweh, called to him and said, Avraham, Avraham, Hineni, here I am. Do not raise your hand against the boy. Do not harm him, for now I know. For now I know you fear Elohim. To fear Elohim in the midst of you're going to have a son through this son, your seed is going to come through this son, but kill him. And you fear Adonai more than anything else. That's what Adonai loves. And you did not refuse me, your son, your only son, your Yahid son, your only, tu único, el único. Then looking up, Avraham saw a ram caught by its horns in a bush. It's interesting that Avraham so loved Elohim that he gave his only begotten son. Avraham so loved Elohim that he gave his only begotten Son. Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. The giving of only begotten. Abraham, the man of faith, gave up knowing that the promise of Elohim, I have to kill my son, but the solution is Adonai could raise him from the dead. Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Again, what is the solution? Resurrection. Resurrection. Yeshua would rise from the dead. Abraham believed that even if he killed his son, Adonai would raise him from the dead. Hebrews 11:17. It was by faith that Abraham, when put to the test, of course, that's the King James, when was brought with this dilemma, offered up Isaac. He offered to sacrifice his only son, his Yahid son, even though he had yet to receive what had been promised. And he had been told, Isaac is the one through whom your name will be carried on. He was confident. He had faith that Elohim had the power even to raise the dead, and so figuratively speaking, he was given back Isaac from the dead. So from Adonai's point of view, Isaac died. When Abraham got that knife and put it there and was ready to, according to Adonai, Isaac died. And figuratively, in a figurative way, when that ram caught in a thicket was there, that ram became the substitute. That ram became the substitute. And instead of Isaac dying, the ram died. This is what we call a vicarious sacrifice. One in place of the other. And we see that all the way from the beginning. Remember, I've said many times, when Adam and Eve sinned, we see the same thing. The soul that sins, it shall die. If you eat of this, you will die. In dying, you will die, Adonai told Adam. And yet, when they sinned, Adonai performs the first, what I call grace sacrifice. These are grace sacrifices. Grace through faith because of their faith. And Adonai gave grace to Adam and Eve. And it was Adonai who killed an animal. There was another ram caught in the thicket, in a sense, there. And Adonai killed this ram at the beginning of time. The lamb killed from the foundations of the earth. This is in the book of Revelation. And Adonai killed this lamb, and with the skins of the animal, Adonai covered the guilt and shame of Adam and Eve. Vicarious, one for the other. The innocent for the guilty. We see the same thing in Passover. We see the same thing in the whole sacrificial system of Israel. The innocent for the guilty. And Adonai here, through Abraham, allows us to see that. And so Yeshua too suffered outside the gate to sanctify the people with his own blood. Here is Mount Moriah. Here is the Taropoean Valley. This is the Moriah Ridge. And as it goes down to Salim, where Melchizedek lived. And there's the pool of Shalom now. There's the current Zion Gate, the current Jaffa Gate, Damascus Gate, and the current Golden Gate. Gethsemane. Here's the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, the Tyropoeon Valley goes here. Here's where Yeshua, and in those days, this road here, and this was outside the gate. So the gate, as people went out, here is Calvary right there. Inside the old city, the modern old city, but outside the ancient city of Jerusalem in his time. Here's where he was sacrificed, on Mount Moriah, where the Dome of the Rock is. Where the Dome of the Rock is where Isaac was put on that rock. And there is where Adonai says, Abraham, Abraham. The substitute. The substitute. Yeshua is our Passover. Think of Yeshua as our Passover, as our substitute. Yeshua is the one who's symbolic over here. This is symbolic of Yeshua, who takes our place. Not only did he take the place of Isaac, but when we look at Yeshua, he took our place on the cross, because every one of us deserves to die, and yet he took our place. There's so much more that we could. And what happens here is, go to verse 14. After the ram had been sacrificed as a burnt offering in place of his son, as a substitute for his son, as a vicarious offering for his son, Abraham called the place Yahweh Yireh. Yahweh Yireh. The word Yahweh Yireh means Yahweh sees. Yahweh sees. But it's not translated as Yahweh sees. It's translated as Yahweh provides. And hence the saying, on the mountain, Yahweh provides. Of course, we've all heard it as Jehovah Jireh. Remember the old song? There was a song called Jehovah Jireh. But in Hebrew, it's Yahweh Yireh. Yahweh provides. When Yahweh sees a need, he'll provide for that need. And Adonai saw the need in Isaac, and Adonai provided a substitute. And Adonai sees the need of mankind. For Elohim so loved the world. It's a world problem. There's a world problem. And the world problem is sin and death. This is not a Jewish problem, not a Gentile problem. This is not a poor people's problem, a rich people's problem. This is not a male problem. This is not a female problem. This is an everyone problem. And that problem is sin. And the result of sin is death. And every one of us is going to go through that death process. In a sense, Isaac, as that knife was there, he went through that death process. And Adonai, figuratively, it says, raised him from the dead. Well, let me tell you, every one of us is going to go through that death problem. But death is not the end. The solution today is still resurrection. The solution is resurrection. The world needs resurrection, and the only way the world could have resurrection is through Yeshua. Let's go to John chapter 8. Go to John chapter 8. In John chapter 8, beginning with verse 31, is what I call the Abraham chapter. And start with verse 31. To the Jews who believed in him. Now, there was Jews who believed in him and Jews who didn't believe in him. And sometimes you need to kind of see, is he talking to the ones who believed? So here he's talking to Jews who believed in him, what we would call today Messianic Jews. But he's also talking to some Orthodox Jews of the time, rabbinic Jews of the time, along with these. And he says, if you make my word your home, you will indeed be my disciples. Discipleship is if you make the word of Yeshua, the word of Yahweh, your home. Let the Bible be your home. Let the Bible be your home. And then you will be my disciples. You will learn the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered, we are descendant from Abraham. We are descended from Abraham. So when he says the truth shall set you free, they said, wait a second, we're not slaves. We've never been slaves. Oh, yeah, they've been slaves many times. He says, we have never been the slaves of anyone. Right now, they're slaves of Rome. They were slaves of Rome as they were saying this. They were slaves of Greece. They were slaves of the Persians. They were slaves of Babylon. They were slaves of Egypt. They've been slaves most of their lives. And they answered, we are descended from Abraham. We are Abraham's children. Now we're talking here not about the Messianic Jews, not about the believing Jews, but about the unbelieving Jews. There's a lot of Jewish people today that say we are the children of Abraham. But who is the children of Abraham? And we have never been slaves of anyone. I tell you solemnly, Yeshua said, anyone who commits sin is a slave, and the slave's place in the house is not assured. There is assurance and guarantees, and there's some that are not guaranteed. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. Yeshua says, I know that you are children of Abraham. I know you descend from Abraham in the flesh. You're Jewish. You have Judah, David and Judah and Jacob and Isaac and Abraham. Yes, you have that physical lineage. You have that upline to Abraham, but only in the flesh. Only in the flesh. But in spite of that, you want to kill me, because nothing I say has penetrated into you. What I, for my part, speak of is what I have seen with my Father. But you put into action the lessons learned from your father. So now we have a scenario of two fathers. We have Yahweh, the fatherhood of Elohim, and then we have the other father. We have the father, Chasatan. And the true children of Abraham have Yahweh as their father. And they are children of Abraham because they do the works of Abraham. They have the faith of Abraham. And they are saved not by works, not by the works of Torah, not by good deeds, but they are saved by the same faith that Abraham has and makes them children of Abraham and, of course, children of Elohim. So he's talking to a group of people that are not believers. They are sons of Abraham in the flesh, but these people are not sons of Abraham in the spirit. It goes on here, verse 39. They repeated, "Our father is Abraham." Yeshua said to them, "If you were children of Abraham, if you were children of Abraham, who are Abraham's children? But if you were, you would do as Abraham did. As it is, you want to kill me, because I tell you the truth. As I have learned it from Elohim, that is what Abraham did. What you are doing is what your father is doing." Again, they're sons of the devil. They're sons of Hasatan. And the devil is their father. They're not sons of Abraham in the spirit. Yeah, you might be a son of Abraham in the flesh, but that doesn't make you a son of Abraham biblically, spiritually, salvationally. We were not born of prostitution like you. They went on. We have one Father, Elohim. If Elohim were your father, if Elohim were your father, if Abraham was your father, if Elohim is your father, you would love me. Since I come from Elohim, yes, I come from him. These people don't even know Elohim, and they say Elohim is their father. Not that I came because I chose. No, I was sent and by him. Do you know why you cannot take in what I say? It's because you are unable to understand my language. The devil is your father, and you prefer to do what your father wants. These are children of Abraham in the flesh, but not children of Abraham in the spirit. They're children of God in the sense, in the general sense, but not in the specific sense. Yeshua is very bold in telling these people who they are. Yeshua is very bold in making sure that they are only Jews in the flesh. You're not Jews in the spirit. They're only Jews in the flesh. Let's go on. And again, he talks about who Hasatan was, a murderer, and what the Jewish leadership is saying. Verse 47. A child of Elohim listens to the words of Elohim. If you refuse to listen, it is because you are not the children of Elohim. The Jews replied, "Are we not saying that you are a Samaritan and possessed by a devil?" This is the Jewish leadership saying this. Yeshua is talking to the Jewish leadership, and they're saying these things. He talks about honoring the Father. Verse 52. The Jews said, "Now we know for certain that you are possessed. Abraham is dead, and the prophets is dead. And yet you say, whoever keeps my word will never taste death? Are you greater than our father Abraham, who is dead, and the prophets? Who are you claiming to be?" Now that's a very important question. Who are you claiming to be? And then Yeshua says, if I were to seek my glory, that would be no glory at all. My glory is conferred by the Father, by the one whom you say he is our Elohim. Although you do not know him, but I know him. And if I were to say I do not know him, then I should be a liar, just like you are liars. But I do know him, and I faithfully keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to think that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. When did Abraham see the day of Yeshua? When did Abraham and Yeshua ever communicate? Wait a second. They said, "You are now 50 and you have seen Abraham?" How could, Abraham is dead. Wait a second, you're not even 50 years old. And you say you've seen. Who are you claiming to be? And of course, that's when Yeshua says, before Abraham was, I am. That's where he says, ego eimi in Greek, Yahweh. I am Yahweh. Oh, wait a second. Yeshua is claiming to be Yahweh here. You're not 50 yet before Abraham was, I am. Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. When did Yeshua and Abraham have a meeting? On the way to Sodom and Gomorrah. There on the way to Sodom and Gomorrah, as Yahweh and Abraham are talking, having a meeting. I wish I would have been in that conversation. What did Yahweh, the pre-incarnate Yeshua, tell Abraham that Abraham didn't tell nobody? Secrets that were passed on, prophecies, promises that were passed on. We don't have the whole story. We only have what Abraham was allowed to reveal and Adonai revealed to us. And so over here we see the idea that Yeshua and Abraham, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. Can you imagine? Abraham, who had the promises from Adonai, my greater son, Yeshua, salvation. You are Abraham's heirs according to the promise. Let's go to Galatians 3. And Galatians is very rich on this. And again, we looked up some of it last week. But we'll go to Galatians. And some of the things, I'm just going to go through some of the verses that chapter 3. And verse 6. Take Abraham, for example. He put his faith in Elohim. And this faith was considered as justifying him, as making him righteous. Don't you see that it is those who rely on faith who are the sons of Abraham? Very, very clearly. It is those who rely on faith who are the sons of Abraham. The sons of Abraham are not necessarily those who are genetically the sons of Abraham. The sons of Abraham are not those that are natural branches of the olive tree that was planted, cultivated from Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, to the 12, to every person that would call themselves an Israelite or Jewish. The sons of Abraham are those who follow the promise of Abraham. He put his faith in Elohim, and this faith was considered as justifying them. Don't you see that it is those who rely on faith who are the sons of Abraham? Scripture foresaw this, that Elohim was going to use faith to justify the Gentiles, and proclaimed the gospel long ago when Abraham was told, in you all the nations will be blessed. Those, therefore, who rely on faith receive the blessings of Abraham, the man of faith. Again, has nothing to do with being Jewish, has nothing to do with being Israelite, Hebrew, has to do with faith. Faith plus Yeshua makes you a son of Abraham. Makes you a son of Abraham. Again, verse 15. Compare this, brothers, to what happens in ordinary life. If a will has been drawn up in due form, no one is allowed to disregard it or add to it. Now the promises were addressed to Abraham and to his seed. Notice in passing that Scripture does not use a plural word as if there were several descendants. It uses the singular to his seed, posterity, which is Messiah. To one. The promises that were addressed to Abraham were not to Abraham and the Jewish people. They were to Abraham and Messiah, Yeshua. The promises of Abraham, yes, Abraham also was going to have a seed and seeds and many descendants as stars, but not all those stars are physical descendants. Some of those stars are from the nations. He's going to have as many descendants as the sand in the seashore. Not all those are Jewish. Not all those are Hebrew. Many of those sand are Gentiles from the nations. But together they make up the descendants of Abraham, the heirs he was promised. And of course, we went through this last week, but let's go through it again. Chapter 3, verse 26. And you, all of you, he's talking to Gentiles in Galatia and to believers in Galatia that were Jewish and Gentile believers. All of you are sons of Elohim through faith in Messiah. You're not sons of Elohim because you were born Jewish. You're not sons of Elohim because you're Hebrew or Israelite. You are sons of Elohim only through faith in Messiah. Without faith in Messiah, even though you are a chosen person, even though Adonai loves you because of the patriarchs, without Yeshua, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, Yeshua said. And we need to be bold in that. All who are baptized in Messiah, if you are baptized in Messiah, if you've been immersed in Messiah, if you have been mikvahd in Messiah, you have all clothed yourself with Messiah. And there is no more distinction between Jew and Greek, slave and free, male and female. All of you are one in Messiah Yeshua. By belonging to Messiah, you are the children of Abraham, the heirs he was promised. So what makes a person a child of Abraham is not genetics, it's not blood. What makes a person a child of Abraham is believing the promises, accepting Yeshua, being immersed in Yeshua, and following Yeshua. Now you are a children of Elohim. Let's go to Romans. Romans chapter 9. Watch what Romans chapter 9 says. Not all who descend from Israel are Israel. Not all who descend from Israel are Israel. Not all descendants of Abraham are his true children. Remember, it is through Isaac that your name will be carried on, which means it is not physical descent that decides who are the children of Elohim. It is only the children of the promise who will count as true descendants. The actual words in which the promise was made were, I shall visit you at such and such a time, and Sarah will have a son. Even more to the point was when it was said to Rebekah, Rivka, when she was pregnant by our ancestor Isaac, but before her twin children were born, and before either of them had done good or bad, in order to stress Elohim's choice is free. The most important thing that we need to get from this is the idea that it is not of which group you belong, Jew or Gentile. It's on who you place your faith, and that you place your faith. That is the vital importance. And that makes you part of the olive tree of Israel. This makes you part of the one tree from Jeremiah 11:15 and Romans 11:15 and following. This makes us part of the olive tree of Israel. And this olive tree of Israel is made up of Jew and Gentile. And any person, the Jewish people that do not believe, who do not have faith, are cut off. But the Gentiles who believe are grafted in. Now Adonai has regrafted, and Adonai is regrafting, and there's going to come a time when, because Adonai still loves Israel, always remember, Adonai has never and will never abandon Israel. The chosen people will be chosen people for all. And yes, individuals will be lost. But Israel as a whole in the future will be saved. A remnant. In fact, Adonai has always had a remnant of Israel throughout the ages. And I wish we could go more. I've already gone more than our time. But there's so much to this, and we'll continue studying much of this in the future. Let's go ahead and stand. I thank you, Father, that your choice is free, and that you chose Abraham, that Israel is the chosen nation, the royal priesthood. And Father, I pray for the salvation of Israel, because Israel is lost today. Jewish people are lost today, Father, without Yeshua. And I pray for their salvation. We pray for the salvation of the nations, because the nations are lost. The Gentiles are lost without Yeshua. Father, whoever, Jew, Gentile, male, female, rich or poor, accepts Yeshua, he becomes a child of Abraham. He becomes part of the olive tree of Israel. And together, Father, together, Jew and Gentile become the one new man. We become part of the new covenant, Father. And I give you honor and glory. Yevarechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha. Ayir Yahweh panav elecha v'yichunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.